All right, so for mic levels, we'll get started with your name, first and last, and how you spell it, and your role with the state of Tennessee.
Awesome. My name is Adam Lowe, ADAMLOWE. I'm a state senator for District 1 in East Tennessee.
Gotcha, absolutely. So, the reason why I wanted to get your opinion on this is your colleague from the other side of the aisle, Heidi Campbell, released a couple of different statistics in relating to firearm deaths, specifically. Tennessee, and this is going back to 2023. I guess the 2024 and 25 data have not been released. But Tennessee, quote unquote, ranks seventh in firearm fatalities, sixth in firearm homicides, and 11th in firearm suicides. Now, just to start off the basics, is what are some trends that you notice maybe with, I would say, the high volume of firearm deaths?
I'm going to challenge that notion of high volume firearm deaths. The trend I'm seeing is data manipulation. I think my colleague's claim is that Republican led states have higher rates of firearm violence. And that's a strategic, data manipulation to kind of delimit to the state level. But when you look at the areas of the state where those things happen, they're democratically led. They're at the local jurisdictions led by Democrats. And the Heller decision out of the Supreme Court involving Washington, D.C., pretty much rendered the ability of locals to manage gun policy and to restrict it. And so the most restricted cities are the bluer cities, even if in red states. Tennessee's gun violence rate is around 22.2 per 100,000 people. Memphis is twice that. And so Memphis makes up the large portion. The blue areas of Tennessee and the blue areas of red states make up the largest portion of the gun homicide rate and the gun homicide crime.
Absolutely. And moving to my next question is, I know that I believe it was Senator Bailey came out with a law last year that was passed. Now schools are trying to enact it.
Mm.
The gun safety class law, where schools are requiring their students to take gun safety classes and whatnot. Are there any, um, I would say, other bills, other laws, for lack of a better term, that you have sponsored or you have supported to try to get this number down? And I know, obviously, you said that in your view, these happen in more bluer areas. But what are your thoughts on that?
Well, the revelation that more gun control in blue cities that put more gun control in place do not affect safety is a pretty stark, it's a pretty stark revelation there. I supported the bill for gun safety classes. Again, that was a bill more to make accidental deaths decrease. When we talk about intentional misuse of firearms for things like homicide and crime, it's a different discussion. I think we as a state have been more embracing of allowing law abiding people their full access to their constitutional rights. I carried a bill that would have allowed them to carry long arms as much as they do firearm, handguns. And that bill is still sitting in the legislature, but that's law abiding people we're talking about. But when we look at crime, when we look at homicides, the highest rate of gun homicides is in Washington, D.C., the District of Columbia. The left loves to trim out that top performer when they go down the list of high homicide rates. In fact, if we look at just the number of deaths, not the rate, California leads the nation. 2,000 deaths per year compared to number one for gun homicide rate in red states is Mississippi. They're a fourth of that, a fourth. So this indication or this claim that Republican leadership somehow equals more firearm deaths is a spurious association. It's not based in the data. The data used to champion that idea is getting in the way of keeping people safer. Pulling the lever of gun control does not create safety in a community. If it did, Chicago would be the safest city in the nation. Memphis would be the safest city in Tennessee. They are not, because that's not the lever. We have to look at things like mental health and distress. And the left has coddled lifestyles and mental illness that allows people to disassociate from reality and the consequences of reality. And it's very easy to coddle that mental illness and for it to transition towards not perceiving the consequences of things like homicide as being real. So until the left can come to the table and admit that we have to promote healthy lifestyles, we have to tackle mental illness, we have to properly fund law enforcement, and we have to, be a law and order state, we're not going to see safety increase for our population.
Absolutely. And you were just going into mental health and distress and stuff like that. Uh, if you would maybe go into why that's more of a problem than what your colleagues are saying. Because at least by my words, you were saying that some of these shootings are up or trending because of mental health and I would say some of the stuff you said.
Right. Well, 100% of homicides and crimes committed with firearms are predicated by someone's decision to do them, someone's mind reasoned to the action. We still embrace the idea that homicidal mentalities are mentally abnormal, that they're not normal. So we have to approach this from the mentality that leads people to homicide. And so you can't do that until you start considering both mental illness and the mental distress that contributes to those things.
Gotcha. And what would your suggestion be? I think this would be my final question is what would your suggestion be to kind of like curb that? Because I know I asked Heidi a similar question, how do you curb the numbers that you kind of came up with if so quote unquote your bills are not getting through legislation, they're not being passed.
Mhm.
I guess to curb it to your point is how would you and I get it, sometimes you represent a certain area that might be higher in crime or whatnot, but how would you curb that mental distress or how would you kind of like try to solve it at a local community level rather than a state legislature level?
Well, at the legislative level, the first thing we got to do is quit chasing straw men like gun control. That gets in the way of real conversations that affect people. I mean, just look at the United States. We have doubled the number of firearms, 500 million firearms in the US, yet violent crime and gun related crimes are down 40% over the last 30, 40 years. So the number of guns does not equal more crime, but they continue to hammer that, hammer that, and hammer that because the political equity of it's much, much higher and it's easier to cast blame. It's harder for people from a policy perspective to target populations of need because anytime you target a population of need like the mentally distressed and you start to try to identify it, it goes against the trend of profiling. It goes against those leftist trends that have said, no, everybody's the same. Everybody's going to have the same. Everybody's going to do the same. Everybody's going to get the same number of rights. And we're all the same, regardless of our mental conditions. And what we know is that some people are incapable of making proper decisions for the safety of everyone else. And we have to identify those people. But anytime we've tried to identify them, anytime we've tried to identify commonalities in the mental conditions and lifestyles of people who perpetrate things like mass violence, we hit a wall. We hit a wall not because of practical reasons, but political reasons. And so when we get to the streets, how do we curb that? I'm going to tell you that if we start with the family, we start with the family. Our kids right now are the most mentally distressed they've ever been, 3 times more suicidal, depressed, and anxious than any generation before. Our adolescent females are 4 times more likely to visit an ER, have inflicted self-harm. There's a fundamental breakdown in child rearing that we have to get back to in strengthening the family, making families aware of addiction, technology addiction, the disassociation that happens when kids live alternate realities in cyberspace. That disassociation, if carried into adulthood, allows them to disassociate from the crimes they commit. So these are the real questions. These are the real studies we should be looking at. And I can tell you, I've seen almost no effort from my colleagues on the left to go down those pathways.
Gotcha.